The world had been at peace. At least, that's what it felt like. Cities were bustling with life, technology advancing at an unstoppable pace, and people went about their daily routines, unaware of the storm brewing in the cosmos. The very idea of an invasion seemed like something from the history books, relegated to past wars or fiction. But on that fateful day, the skies proved otherwise. It began with a flash. A streak of light in the heavens, so bright that it almost looked like the sun was being swallowed whole. Panic spread across the globe as people looked up, eyes widening, trying to understand what they were witnessing. In moments, the first of the alien ships broke through the clouds, massive and looming, casting shadows over entire cities. Then more followed. Dozens, no hundreds, of gleaming metallic ships, each larger than any building, each brimming with weaponry far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. The Zinthar, as the invaders would come to be known, had arrived. Their message was simple but terrifying, broadcast through every channel, every device. Surrender or be annihilated. A chilling calmness to their voice sent shivers through the hearts of all who heard it. The alien race, a proud species with an empire spanning dozens of galaxies, had deemed humanity insignificant. To them, Earth was just another world to conquer. At first, the human response was one of disbelief. Surely this was some sort of joke. How could such a powerful force arrive and demand surrender without any provocation? Earth's leaders scrambled for answers. But there was no time to waste on explanations. The Zinthar didn't give humanity the luxury of time. In mere hours, the first wave of destruction began. Pulses of energy lashed out from the Zinthar ships, disintegrating entire buildings with a single blast. The military tried to retaliate, launching missiles and jets into the sky, but they were vaporized before they even got close. Earth's most advanced weapon systems were powerless against the alien onslaught. It became evident that the Zinthar weren't just invaders. They were conquerors, experienced in wiping out entire civilizations with terrifying efficiency. Among the chaos, a group of ordinary people found themselves thrust into a conflict they never asked for. Jake Carter, a mechanic from New York, was fixing an engine in his garage when the first Zinthar ship appeared overhead. The roar of the engines shook the ground beneath him, and instinctively, he ducked under the nearest vehicle, eyes scanning the skies in horror. His fingers trembled as he reached for his phone, but there was no signal. Everything was going dark. Sarah Thompson, a scientist from a small town in Colorado, watched the news in her apartment, frozen in disbelief. She'd spent her life studying advanced theoretical physics, and yet nothing in her training could have prepared her for this. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a complete overpowering force, capable of destroying everything in its path. She had only one thought. She needed to get to the lab and figure out if there was any way to fight back. Meanwhile, Marcus Jensen, a former soldier, had already seen the signs of collapse. With his military training, he immediately began rounding up survivors, organizing them into makeshift defenses. It didn't matter that they were outgunned. He knew one thing: humans could fight back. They always did. As the world descended into chaos, the first glimmers of human defiance began to emerge. From the streets of New York to the deserts of Nevada, ordinary people took up arms, whether they had training or not, fighting with everything they had. They weren't soldiers. They weren't generals. But they were humans, and that made all the difference. In the days that followed, humanity learned what it meant to truly fight for survival. The invaders had underestimated them. They had dismissed the idea of resistance, believing their technological superiority would crush the humans in a matter of days. But as the first sparks of rebellion began to spread, they realized that the fight was only just beginning. And no one, not even the Zinthar, could predict what humanity would do next. The aftermath of the initial invasion left the world reeling. In major cities across the globe, Zinthar forces had swiftly decimated any organized resistance. Militaries were crushed, communications disrupted, and the few remaining strongholds were being systematically destroyed. Earth's leaders, once proud and confident, now cowered in the face of such overwhelming power. The world's governments were in disarray, unsure of what to do next. Yet, despite the overwhelming alien might, there was something the Zinthar hadn't anticipated, something they couldn't calculate. It was the spark of human determination. The first sign of this hidden strength came just days after the initial bombardment. A group of civilians in New York, led by Jake Carter, staged an audacious attack on a Zinthar weapons depot in the heart of the city. Jake, who had no military training, only a sharp mind and steady hands from years of working with machines, had managed to modify some of the alien weapons they'd scavenged. His crew, a mix of mechanics, hackers, and engineers, launched a surprise strike using nothing but makeshift explosives and the alien tech they had reverse-engineered. It was a small victory, but one that sent a shockwave through the resistance. News of the attack spread quickly across social media and underground channels, boosting morale. Humanity's refusal to submit wasn't just a reaction to their destruction. It was in their blood, something they were born with. In Colorado, Sarah Thompson watched Jake's success unfold on her lab's video feed. At first, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Ordinary people without any training had outsmarted the Zinthar. The aliens' technology was advanced beyond anything Earth had, but human ingenuity had somehow found a way to turn their own weapons against them. Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the adaptability of her species. It was in their nature to learn, to innovate, to solve problems even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. Realizing the importance of this, she reached out to a few trusted colleagues and quickly put together a team to study the captured Zinthar technology. Sarah hypothesized that humanity's ability to learn and adapt under pressure, something unique to their species, was their greatest strength. Unlike the Zinthar, whose methods were rigid and predictable, humans could think outside the box. The Zinthar would never expect them to fight this way. Meanwhile, Marcus Jensen, now a leader of a growing resistance cell, saw the patterns emerging. He knew that a full-scale military confrontation with the Zinthar would only end in defeat, but if humanity could leverage their unorthodox tactics, using surprise, adaptability, and sheer unpredictability, they might have a chance. As he led his ragtag group of survivors through abandoned streets and bombed-out cities, he drilled them in these new tactics: hit and run, sabotage, using the environment to their advantage. The Zinthar, meanwhile, were growing increasingly frustrated. Zarthok, the Zinthar commander overseeing the invasion, had expected Earth to fall easily, but humanity's defiance was unlike anything they had encountered. Their unpredictability, their creativity in battle, was throwing off the Zinthar's highly structured military strategies. They weren't supposed to be this resourceful. The humans weren't supposed to have the ability to adapt so quickly, to make their own weapons out of scraps and salvage. But this, Zarthok learned too late, was humanity's greatest asset. Every setback only fueled their determination. Every defeat, every loss, drove them to adapt, to learn, to innovate. They might not be able to match the Zinthar in firepower or technology, but they had something the invaders would never understand: the will to fight, no matter the odds. By the time Zarthok realized how dangerous this trait could be, it was already too late. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. The tide was beginning to turn, and the Zinthar were starting to realize that the greatest weapon they had underestimated wasn't their superior technology. It was the very thing that made humans who they were: their ability to never give up. The first wave of alien attacks had devastated cities, but humanity had begun to fight back in ways that no one, not even the Zinthar, could have foreseen. Though the odds were stacked against them, the human spirit, embodied in every person who had fought tooth and nail to protect their homes, was far from broken. And just as the Zinthar began to question their strategy, the humans made an incredible breakthrough. Sarah Thompson had been working day and night with a small group of scientists in a hidden underground lab. The device they had captured from a downed Zinthar ship, an energy weapon unlike anything humanity had ever seen, had been the key to their survival. For weeks, Sarah and her team had painstakingly reverse-engineered the alien tech, their minds racing to unlock its secrets. The challenge had been immense, but Sarah's unique understanding of human adaptability and alien technology had led to an unexpected breakthrough. They had figured out how to harness the energy weapon's power and use it against the Xinthar's own fleet. However, there was a problem. The weapon wasn't a simple tool that could be easily deployed. It required an incredibly volatile and precise energy source, one that was unstable and could only be triggered under specific conditions. The team had succeeded in activating the weapon once, during a test run, but the consequences had been disastrous. The power it unleashed was immense, far stronger than anything the humans had ever seen, but it had nearly wiped out Sarah's lab in the process. The weapon was unpredictable, dangerous, and most frighteningly, the only thing that had even a remote chance of bringing down the Xinthar fleet. Sarah's team had a choice: continue refining the weapon in the hopes of perfecting it, or deploy it in a desperate attempt to save what was left of Earth. The decision was clear. Even though the risk was monumental, they would have to use it. Meanwhile, the Xinthar's commander, Zarthok, was growing increasingly ruthless in his attempts to crush humanity. His forces were scattered across the globe, but his arrogance made him blind to the subtle shifts in human resistance. Every major city he obliterated only seemed to spark more uprisings, more rebellions. The humans were not folding. They were fighting back harder than ever, and their tactics were becoming more sophisticated. In the small town of Riverton, Marcus Jensen was leading a growing band of survivors, mostly civilians, but also former military personnel who had joined the cause. The news of Sarah's breakthrough reached him, and though Marcus had always been a realist, he knew this was the one shot they had at stopping the alien invaders. With the weapon in development, Marcus and his group began to prepare for what was coming next. Their mission was clear: infiltrate one of the Xinthar's key military facilities, disable their command structure, and use Sarah's weapon to destroy the heart of their fleet. It would be a suicide mission. The Xinthar would have no mercy, and the humans had only one chance to strike before the aliens realized what they were up to. The plan was simple but dangerous: infiltrate the Xinthar stronghold, place the device, and then get out before the Xinthar could retaliate. But Marcus knew there was no guarantee they would all make it out alive. The resistance was growing, but it was fractured. Some wanted to fight back the conventional way, through military might, through force. Others, like Sarah, saw the way forward in using ingenuity and unconventional tactics to outwit the Xinthar. Marcus didn't know which path would lead to victory, but he did know one thing: humanity had nothing left to lose. With every passing day, the stakes grew higher. The Xinthar were aware of the human resistance's successes, and they were more determined than ever to finish the job. But as the resistance prepared to launch their boldest strike yet, they knew that the true power of humanity had yet to fully reveal itself. They had been underestimated, and the Xinthar were about to learn the hard way that humanity would never give up without a fight. The human resistance was beginning to organize into something far greater than the scattered groups of survivors and fighters they had once been. The world's governments, battered and fragmented, had finally reached a fragile accord. While many of Earth's military forces had been decimated, small pockets of resistance were emerging from the ashes. The international unity that had once seemed impossible was now a reality, with leaders from all over the globe joining forces to oppose the alien threat. At the heart of this new coalition was Maria Lawson, a former diplomat who had become the symbol of humanity's resilience. She understood the stakes better than anyone. Time was running out, and the Xinthar were no longer just an invading force. They were a planetary threat. Maria spearheaded the formation of the United Earth Front, UEF, an alliance of military leaders, scientists, and civilians determined to end the Xinthar occupation. The UEF's first major operation under Maria's leadership was an ambitious attempt to disrupt the Xinthar's communications network, a move that would cripple their ability to coordinate attacks. They had no illusions that it would be easy, and failure meant certain annihilation. But for the first time, the Resistance felt they had a fighting chance. They would strike at the heart of the Zinthar's command structure, and if they succeeded, it could be the beginning of the end. Meanwhile, Marcus Jensen, still a key leader in the Resistance, had received troubling news from his trusted informants. A leak within their ranks had emerged, and there was a growing suspicion that someone in their inner circle was betraying them to the Zinthar. The possibility of a traitor struck at the core of everything the Resistance had built. If they couldn't trust each other, how could they possibly stand against the Zinthar? It wasn't long before Marcus and his team found themselves questioning everyone. Was it one of the soldiers in their group, or perhaps a high-ranking member of the United Earth Front who had been compromised? Marcus had always trusted his instincts, but this time, his gut told him something was terribly wrong. Their victory depended not just on defeating the Zinthar, but on rooting out the enemy within. The paranoia weighed heavily on Marcus as he led his cell through a series of covert operations. They had already infiltrated a Zinthar supply line and were preparing to launch an attack on one of their strongholds, but Marcus could feel the tension building within his ranks. Every whispered conversation, every side glance, every unfamiliar face that joined their ranks left him wondering, who can I trust? Then the unthinkable happened. While leading a critical assault on a Zinthar weapons facility, Marcus's team was ambushed. The Zinthar were waiting for them, armed with an overwhelming number of soldiers and advanced weaponry. It was clear the attack had been tipped off. Someone had betrayed them. The ambush decimated Marcus's team, and in the chaos, he barely escaped with his life. The truth was undeniable. There was a traitor among them. Back in the Resistance's secret base, Sarah Thompson was struggling with her own doubts. The pressure to finish the weapon, the pressure to end the war, was weighing heavily on her. She had been working tirelessly to perfect the alien device, but each test revealed new dangerous flaws. The power it unleashed was terrifying, and every time they tested it, Sarah felt like they were playing with fire. Could this weapon really bring down the Zinthar, or would it destroy everything they were trying to protect? As Sarah and her team worked to refine the weapon, they became more aware of the growing rift between the factions within the Resistance. Some wanted to use the weapon immediately, throwing caution to the wind in their desperation. Others, like Sarah, feared what would happen if it malfunctioned. She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was their ability to think their way out of situations, to outwit their enemies. But now, in the face of extinction, that same ingenuity was being twisted into something darker, something that could destroy them. As tensions rose, Maria Lawson took a calculated risk. She ordered a covert operation to track down the traitor and put an end to the internal conflict. A small team, led by Marcus, was dispatched to infiltrate a Zinthar communication hub where they believed the traitor's signals had been intercepted. But Marcus, still reeling from the ambush and the loss of his comrades, was torn between loyalty to the cause and the desire for revenge. Who was the traitor? Was it someone close to him? Someone he had trusted? The truth, when it finally came to light, shattered everything. It wasn't just a single traitor. It was a web of betrayal, with several high-ranking members of the United Earth Front involved in leaking intelligence to the Zinthar. Maria's leadership, once seen as a beacon of hope, was now called into question. The unity they had fought so hard to achieve was crumbling. As Marcus, Sarah, and Maria stood amidst the ruins of their resistance, the weight of their situation became all too clear. The Zinthar were growing more ruthless, and internal divisions threatened to tear them apart. But in the darkest moment, humanity had one last card to play: their unity, their resilience, and their unwillingness to give up, no matter the cost. The resistance was on the edge of collapse. The betrayal had not only fractured the unity of their forces, but also shattered their morale. The Zinthar, sensing the growing discord among the humans, began to escalate their attacks, hitting key resistance hubs with brutal efficiency. In the wake of their defeat, Marcus Jensen found himself questioning everything he had fought for. Had they been too naive? Was this war already lost? Despite the mounting pressure, Sarah Thompson refused to back down. She had witnessed the resilience of the human spirit firsthand, and she knew that there was still hope, if they could just find a way to bring their fractured forces together. The weapon they had developed, though unpredictable and dangerous, was humanity's only chance at turning the tide. But now, with the growing divisions within their ranks, the question remained, could they even trust each other enough to use it? Maria Lawson, having been confronted with the painful truth of the traitor's web within her own ranks, struggled to maintain control of the United Earth Front. Her leadership, once unshakable, was now questioned by those who had once followed her without question. The very people she had fought to unite were now divided, not just by external forces, but by their own fear and distrust. In the midst of this chaos, the Zinthar launched their most devastating assault yet, a full-scale attack on one of Earth's last remaining strongholds, a city that had become a symbol of human resistance. The city was one of the few places where civilians, soldiers, and scientists still worked together, rebuilding, strategizing, and preparing for humanity's final stand. But the Zinthar were relentless. Their overwhelming firepower turned the city into a battleground of fire and rubble, with every street and building being obliterated in a matter of hours. Marcus, now leading a small battle-worn group of survivors, watched from the outskirts of the city as the invasion unfolded. His heart burned with a fierce anger, but also a deep sense of helplessness. He had led his people through so much, yet it felt like no matter how hard they fought, the Zinthar always seemed one step ahead. Each victory they achieved only led to more losses. Was it worth it? Was humanity truly capable of winning this war? But then, as the chaos of the invasion reached its peak, something unexpected happened. A small team of resistance fighters, led by Sarah herself, arrived at the heart of the destruction. Their mission was simple: deliver the weapon. It was time to use it, despite the risks. As Sarah and her team infiltrated the Zinthar's central command post, they fought their way through waves of alien soldiers, each step feeling like a battle for their very survival. They knew this would be their final chance to turn the tide of the war. The Zinthar had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, but this was something beyond adaptation. This was desperation. At the heart of the Zinthar command post, Sarah finally reached the chamber where the device could be activated. But as she approached, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Zarthok, the Zinthar commander, was there, waiting. He had known about their plan. The Zinthar had been watching their every move. The trap had been set. The aliens had anticipated the weapon, and they were prepared to disable it before it could be used. But what Zarthok didn't realize was that Sarah had anticipated him as well. Just as the Zinthar commander advanced, Sarah activated the weapon. A surge of energy ripped through the room, tearing through the walls, and for a moment, everything went dark. When the light returned, the alien structure was in ruins, but Sarah's team had vanished. Back in the ruins of the city, Marcus received the news. The device had worked. The Zinthar command structure had been obliterated, but Sarah and her team were gone. It was the one victory they needed, but at a cost that no one could have predicted. The Zinthar, though severely damaged, were not defeated. The weapon had struck a blow, but the war was far from over. The true power of humanity had yet to be realized. Now, with their strongest leaders gone, the remaining survivors had only one choice. They had to unite, once and for all. But could they do it? Could they put aside their differences long enough to stop the alien threat once and for all? In the wake of Sarah's disappearance, the human resistance was thrown into turmoil. The weapon, the one thing that had given them hope, had been used with devastating effect. The Zinthar command structure had been obliterated, but at a steep price. Sarah Thompson, the brilliant mind behind the weapon, was now presumed dead. And with her gone, the world was left to grapple with the consequences of their victory, and the lingering doubt that it had come too late. Marcus Jensen stood at the edge of the ruined city, staring out at the smoking wreckage. His heart ached with the loss of his comrades and the uncertain future that lay ahead. The victory they had so desperately needed had come at a cost too high to measure. Sarah was gone, and with her, their hope that they could one day rebuild their world. But something inside Marcus wouldn't let him give up. Sarah had shown them the way, the human way. They didn't have to rely on brute strength or superior technology. They could outthink their enemies, adapt to the unexpected, and survive against the odds. Even in the face of overwhelming darkness, humanity could find a way forward. The remaining leaders of the United Earth Front were now gathered in a hidden underground base, reeling from the loss of their brightest minds and warriors. Maria Lawson, who had once united the nations of Earth under the banner of resistance, now found herself struggling to keep the fragile alliance intact. The Zinthar were regrouping, more determined than ever to wipe out humanity, but the loss of their command structure had thrown them into disarray. The Zinthar were not invincible. They had just learned a hard lesson. Underestimating humans was a mistake they could never afford to make again. The surviving resistance fighters gathered, and it was here that Marcus made his decision. It was time to take the fight to the heart of the Zinthar Empire itself. They had no choice but to go on the offensive, no matter the cost. "We can't afford to wait for them to regroup," Marcus said, his voice steady but resolute. "We need to strike while they're vulnerable. We have one last chance to end this, and we need to hit them where it hurts most, their homeworld." Maria Lawson nodded grimly, though the weight of the decision was clear in her eyes. "We'll need everything we've got. Every survivor, every weapon, every piece of intelligence. We're going in blind, and the odds are against us. But if we don't try, we've already lost." The plan was simple, yet almost impossible. The remaining resistance forces would assemble a fleet using whatever scraps of alien technology they could salvage. They would infiltrate the Zinthar homeworld, strike at their power core, and bring down the heart of the Zinthar Empire. It was a suicide mission, but it was humanity's last chance. The resistance fighters who volunteered for the mission knew the risks. They had already lost so much, but now they had something to fight for: the survival of humanity, the future of their children, and the legacy of those who had already sacrificed so much. As Marcus and Maria looked over the assembled forces, ragtag, broken and scared, they saw something they hadn't seen in weeks: unity. Despite their losses, despite their differences, the people of Earth were coming together. The Zinthar might have crushed their cities, obliterated their armies, and decimated their governments, but they could never break the human spirit. With a deep breath, Marcus addressed his fellow fighters. "This is it. This is the final gamble. We may not all make it back, but we've come this far together, and we will finish this together. For Earth, for Sarah, for all of us." And with that, the last remnants of humanity's fighting force gathered their weapons, patched up their makeshift ships, and set off toward the stars. The mission was set in motion. They would face the Zinthar in their own stronghold, where every moment of their struggle for survival would be tested to its limit. As they prepared to leave the safety of their underground base, the survivors knew this was more than a battle for Earth's future. It was a final stand against an enemy that had underestimated them at every turn. The Zinthar had believed they could wipe out humanity, but they were wrong. Humanity's strength lay not in their weapons, their technology, or their military might. It lay in their will to fight, to survive, and to never, ever give up. Now, they would take that final stand. The fleet of patched-together ships, a mishmash of human ingenuity and stolen Zinthar technology, now sailed through the stars with a single unified purpose. For Marcus Jensen, the journey to the Zinthar homeworld felt like an eternity. Each passing day in the cold emptiness of space was filled with memories of the countless fallen comrades, the lost cities, the broken families. But there was something else, too, a flicker of hope, however small, that this mission could bring it all to an end. As the fleet approached the outskirts of the Zinthar system, the enormity of what they were about to attempt settled heavily over the group. There were no illusions here. The odds were insurmountable. They would be outnumbered, outgunned, and they had no idea what kind of defenses the Zinthar had in place around their homeworld. But it no longer mattered. This was their final stand, and the survivors weren't about to turn back. Maria Lawson, now fully dedicated to seeing this through, addressed the fleet in a final, somber speech. "This is it. We are humanity's last hope. The Zinthar believe we're a broken species, weak, and on the brink of extinction. It's time we show them how wrong they are. We fight for our future, for everything we've lost. But most of all, we fight for our right to survive." Marcus, standing beside Maria, took in the faces of the crew. There were no more speeches to give, no more plans to make. They had come too far. All that was left was to strike, to hit the heart of the Zinthar Empire before it was too late. The Zinthar homeworld loomed large in the distance, a massive industrialized planet, surrounded by layers of defense systems that made even the bravest of soldiers uneasy. The fleet approached the planet's orbit, and the first sign of trouble came when their long-range sensors lit up. Zinthar warships, swarming like an angry hive, surged toward them. They had been detected. The time for subtlety was over. Brace for impact. Marcus yelled over the comms as Zinthar ships descended on them like a storm. The first blast of enemy fire shook their fleet to its core, sending ships veering off course. A wave of explosions rippled through the fleet, and Marcus gripped the controls of his own ship, trying to keep it steady as chaos erupted around them. "We fight to the end." Maria's voice rang out over the comms as the fleet dispersed into a chaotic, high-speed dogfight. Fighters darted through space, evading enemy blasts while launching counterattacks. Explosions filled the void as Zinthar ships began to fall, but it was clear that the human fleet was outmatched in both numbers and firepower. Despite the carnage, Marcus remained focused. The mission wasn't to engage in a drawn-out battle. It was to infiltrate the Zinthar capital and plant the final blow. The resistance ships had one chance to break through the alien defenses and reach the planet's core. But first, they had to get past the defensive grid, an impenetrable force field surrounding the planet's atmosphere. Serva's device, Marcus muttered to himself, recalling the weapon that had started it all. They had it, but it was untested on such a massive scale. Its power could be the only thing capable of disabling the Zinthar's planetary defenses. He turned to his team, all of whom were huddled in the cockpit, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of the control panels. "We need to reach the core, now. Prepare for the final strike. This is our only chance." With that, Marcus and his crew pushed their ship toward the heart of the Zinthar homeworld, fighting against the firestorm of enemy ships that pursued them. Their shields flickered under the constant bombardment. The closer they got, the more the Zinthar poured their fire into them. Through the chaos, Marcus saw it, the heart of the enemy's defenses. The colossal fortress, buried beneath layers of shields and walls, protected by miles of advanced weaponry. The Resistance's strike force was racing against time, and there was no way to avoid the incoming onslaught. It was all or nothing. In the midst of the dogfight, Maria's voice came through again, firm and unwavering. "We've got one shot, people. We take down that fortress and bring the Zinthar to their knees. This is the endgame. For Earth." As Marcus's ship plunged deeper into the atmosphere, he heard the weapons systems hum to life. The moment had come. They would either succeed or perish. With every ounce of resolve, Marcus activated the weapon, the one thing that could turn the tide. The device powered up, glowing a fierce blue as it charged with unimaginable energy. "Now," Marcus yelled. The weapon discharged, and the planet's defenses trembled. The force field began to falter, then crack. For a brief moment, it seemed like time itself stood still, the fate of humanity hanging by a thread. The shields collapsed, and Marcus's heart raced. The Resistance had a chance. But there was no time to celebrate. The Zinthar's retaliation came fast and furious, and they had to move quickly to exploit this newfound opening. The battle for Earth's future was far from over, but at this moment, The humans had made a break for victory. The planet trembled as the Resistance's weapon cut through the Zinthar's defenses like a blade through fabric. The shields that had once seemed impenetrable flickered and then collapsed entirely, exposing the heart of the Zinthar's stronghold. The human fleet, battered but unbowed, surged forward, taking advantage of the opening. Their mission was clear: strike at the heart of the Zinthar Empire and end this war once and for all. Marcus Jensen's hands tightened on the controls as he led the charge through the breach. Their fleet, now a disjointed but determined cluster of ships, pushed toward the core of the Zinthar's defenses. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of ionized air and the deafening hum of plasma engines. Zinthar ships, now desperate, regrouped for a counterattack, but they were too slow, their tactical advantage lost. "Stay focused," Marcus shouted over the comms, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We make it through this, we end it all." The final battle raged above the surface of the Zinthar homeworld. Fighters from both sides darted through the atmosphere, their ships flashing in and out of view as they engaged in high-speed combat. Explosions rocked the sky, leaving trails of debris that shone like fireflies in the blackness of space. In the heart of the battle, Maria Lawson's ship led the charge. She had given everything to this cause: her leadership, her strength, her very soul. Now, in the final moments of this fight, she pushed forward with unwavering determination. For Earth, she called out to the fleet, rallying them in the last desperate push toward the Zinthar's central command center. As they neared the core of the Zinthar Empire, they encountered a new layer of defense: an enormous, heavily fortified citadel. Massive towers of blackened metal and energy fields surrounded the area, but Maria's team was ready. With expert precision, the fleet's remaining fighters disabled the outer defenses, creating a path into the citadel's heart. The final assault would be a direct attack on the Zinthar's leadership, the only way to bring this nightmare to an end. Marcus's ship made a last harrowing dive through the remnants of the Zinthar defense lines. His crew was battered, but their resolve was stronger than ever. "We're almost there," he shouted to his team. "We breached their command center in 5 minutes. This is it." Suddenly, a transmission came through from an unknown source. It was a high-ranking Zinthar officer, their voice cold and menacing. "You think you've won, humans. The Zinthar Empire will never fall. You may strike at our heart, but we are eternal." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "Maybe, but we've already beaten you. Humanity will rise. We will survive, and you will fall." Without another word, Marcus cut the transmission. They had no time to waste. The final push to the heart of the Zinthar Empire had begun. The last wave of resistance fighters braced themselves for the most perilous mission of their lives. The massive Zinthar citadel loomed ahead, a fortress of unimaginable size and complexity. At the core of the citadel, the Zinthar leaders, including Zarthok, awaited their final confrontation. Marcus and his team had one shot at this. If they failed, the war would continue, and humanity's last hope would be extinguished. With an explosive roar, the fleet breached the outer gates of the citadel, blasting through the massive walls with everything they had. The moment of reckoning had arrived. On the ground, Marcus's team descended into the depths of the Zinthar stronghold, fighting their way through corridors lined with alien soldiers. The resistance fighters, fatigued but fueled by sheer will, pushed forward, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Their goal was clear: Zarthok and his inner circle. In the heart of the citadel, Zarthok awaited them, standing tall in his battle armor, his eyes burning with fury. "You have come too far, humans," he hissed, his voice thick with venom. "But your defiance ends here." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. "No, your empire ends here." The final battle between Marcus and Zarthok was fierce, each blow shaking the very foundation of the citadel. But as the two adversaries fought, Marcus's team pressed forward, planting explosives that would bring down the Zinthar regime. With each explosive charge, The citadel shook violently, the walls cracking and collapsing as the power core of the Zinthar's empire began to implode. "Time to end this," Marcus growled, using all his strength to deliver the final blow to Zarthak. With one last strike, the Zinthar commander fell, defeated. As the citadel crumbled around them, the last remnants of the Zinthar leadership were obliterated. The planet itself began to tremble, and the once indomitable alien empire began to collapse. Humanity had done it. They had won. The survivors of the resistance gathered in the ruins of the Zinthar stronghold, breathing in the victory they had earned with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The war was over, and humanity had emerged victorious. They had faced extinction and risen from the ashes, proving that their strength lay not in their technology, but in their unity, their will, and their unyielding resolve to survive. As Marcus and Maria stood together in the ruins, looking out over the broken remains of the Zinthar Empire, they knew that the hard work was far from over. But for the first time in years, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. The dawn of a new era had arrived.